Another one of the bigger surprises on draft night, well, maybe not quite as big as the Michael Penix pick, was the Niners. Drafting Ricky Pearsall at 31 um, was not necessarily a position that we thought they would need, not necessarily the player that we thought would be going at that point, projected maybe more so as a day two pick. Um, Sometimes you get those players jumping up into the first round because GMs think higher of them. There was some hype around him. Still a surprise he went in the first round. But as much as the Pearsall pick I think is interesting, I think it is even more interesting as to what it says about the future of this team. The Niners have kind of been able to get by with this great roster because they're paying Brock Purdy um, not basically no money because they drafted him with the last pick of the draft. The bill's eventually going to come due, and there's been rumors about some of their wide receivers, particularly Brandon Ayuk, wanting out, and Deebo Samuel recently got linked to this as well, with trade rumors before the draft saying that the Niners could ship out either Deebo or Ayuk to move up in the draft. That obviously didn't happen, but with this Pearsall pick, and then I believe they picked another receiver in like round 3 or 4.
Yeah,
It's
something like
obvious
that.
they're preparing for something. How realistic do you think the possibility of Ayuk or Debo going elsewhere is? And do you like them picking a receiver at this point to try to prepare for it?
I don't necessarily hate it. I think, I mean, at 31, no matter who you were getting, probably wasn't going to be necessarily the most incredible prospect on earth. You're still getting a great player, obviously, but it's not the worst move considering the factors. Like you pointed out, the Purdy contract, eventually that's going to come due. And eventually you're going to have to stop paying him the number that ESPN likes to bring up once a month. And I mean, it's not a bad move. I haven't personally, as someone who does not follow the NFL draft religiously, I had not heard his name prior. So it was the type of thing where, to me, it was a bit more shocking. But it makes sense, considering, sure, whatever the 49ers GM came out and said, I kind of take that with a grain of salt, especially with with wide receivers. I feel like, especially in the last little bit, we've seen how inconsistent they can be on wanting to stay with certain teams. And, wide receivers being divas is not something that is necessarily new to the NFL world. So, I mean, in a sense, I think it's a pretty smart move. I think, no, at worst case scenario, and I say worst at least for like this draft pick, you end up sliding Pearsall down into your third slot, third or fourth, whatever. Because I believe they have Jawan Jennings as well. He's coming back? I think, right?
Juwan Jennings is most likely coming back, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And
So
it's a good thing you pulled up the article on the screen there in terms of
oh,
what John Lynch said. Just a little wink, wink, nod, nod there. Um, but it is a decent segue to talk about like what he said specifically, where he did basically confirm that they were shopping um, Debo and Ayuk. He said it was on the Pat McAfee show. He said, when you talk about guys like Brandon Ayuk and Debo, they're guys we drafted. They're guys we take a lot of pride in what they've become, who they've become. We couldn't be more proud of those guys. During the course of drafts and off seasons, do conversations happen? Absolutely, they do. We're past that now. So it sounds like it's not happening this year, but it was something they were confirmed in talks about, and I think that's really interesting, um, because eventually they're going to have to pay specifically Ayuk, who's drafted later, big money. I believe they've already locked up Debo. Um, so it's interesting that they're having those conversations because they're gonna have to figure out how to retool their roster. Every team that's good eventually comes across this wall where they're like, we're not able to keep everybody, right? Look even with the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs have been good for so long, but they had to get rid of Tyreek Hill, right? Like
yeah,
got rid of potentially their best player on the team other than Mahomes. Um, Even this year, they had to get rid of L'Jarius Sneed. But the good teams do generally find a way to keep themselves fresh with talent, and I think that's what this Pearsall pick is trying to do. And I know, yeah, he wasn't the most popular prospect in terms of like not hearing his name a bunch. I heard about him more so in terms of like people being like, oh, this is like a round 2 or 3 guy that could surprise some people and be pretty good, not a round 1 pick. So it was definitely a surprise, but I think it's generally a smart move
Yeah.
As much as I hate to admit it. Um, we'll see how it turns out. Um, if they get a good receiver at that pick, though, they're going to be able to trade Ayuk for a decent haul and just continue their run. Like it's a move that I think can open their championship window another like maybe 2 to 3 years, depending on how they play it.
Yeah. No, because I mean, if this guy ends up being elite and ends up being your perfect replacement and much cheaper replacement for a guy like Ayuk or a guy like Debo Samuels, absolutely. Then you're in business. Because I mean, you're also adding whatever you get back for Ayuk and Debo,
Yeah,
which I mean,
exactly.
considering, I get a little bit worried about that. I don't know about you, just because of what we saw the Bills get back for Diggs. I wonder if that is kind of showing where the market for a top receiver sort of is right now, and that makes me a little worried. But I mean,
Yeah,
other than
I think
that,
they get a
if
lot more for Ayuk or Debo.
okay, well then there you go. Like it's just
Yeah.
at least for me when I look at something like that, I get a little worried. I think it kind of makes me wonder more. I mean, who knows? Maybe hopefully you're right for their sense, or considering we're both Seahawks fans, hopefully I'm right. But
No, I hope you're right. I hope they get
yeah,
about nothing.
yeah.
I hope they have to cut him, frankly.
And then the Seahawks pick him up because he sucks, just really,
Yeah,
really
exactly.
sucks. Yeah,
We'll give
but
Debo a chance. I mean,
yeah, it's okay. It's not like
we'll pair him
he.
next to DK. Maybe it'll work.
Yeah, you never know. Like, I mean, he'd make a pretty good like fourth receiver. You think, right? Like, he'd be okay.
Yeah, put him behind Jake Bobo.
I'd sign him for $1 million.
Yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, you know what I mean. Did you say Jake Bobo? I had to think about that.
the Bobo hype is coming. Jake
Yeah.
Bobo breakout season 2024. That's all I'm saying.
I just remember seeing him in the preseason and looking at him on Madden afterwards and seeing he had like 84 speed and went, oh. I was like, yeah, sick. Real next big Seattle receiver right there. Gonna be incredible.
Well, he was actually very good
Yeah.
for an undrafted guy. He's very good. Had the catch of the year. Catch of the year. You go back and watch that catch. Better than Debo and Brandon Ayuk combined. Anyways, in terms of yeah, like I do think like I said, I do think if the Niners do that, I think they will get more back for Ayuk and Debo than they would for Stephon that the Bills got for Stephon Diggs. I think age is a big thing. I think recent performance is a
Oh,
big thing.
okay.
I think those
Yeah.
two factors
How old's
are
Debo?
partially what Debo is same draft as DK Metcalf.
Oh,
So
yeah,
still
I guess.
relatively young. 2019 draft.
He's
Ayuk, I believe,
28.
was either. Yeah, okay.
So
So he's
Diggs, I in my
Diggs
head,
is a lot.
I just think of Diggs as being. Oh no, I'm wrong. Yeah, there's a 2-year gap. Okay, whatever.
2 years actually smaller than I thought it would be, but
That's about what I
even
thought.
recent performance too. I think because Diggs had a little bit of an off year, and they were like
Yeah.
potential like character concerns. I think was a worry too. Not that we know anything
Yes.
about that, but there was rumors about that rift with Josh Allen. There's a lot of other
Yeah.
factors that went into that. Whereas I think you could get a lot more if you're John Lynch, trading this guy away. The flip side of this Ricky Pearsall pick, however, um, is potentially neglecting areas of need. Now, as a Niners team that recently went to the Super Bowl, there's not a lot. But obviously, if you're going to be able to bulk up your offensive or defensive line or something, instead of drafting a receiver that's basically it's the same competition we have with Penix, just on a lesser scale. Like they're drafting more so for the future, I think. But does that put into jeopardy their operations now? Is kind of the worry. Like where do you stand on that? Do you think it's okay to draft a little bit more for the future with this pick? Do you think it's a little bit better than what Penix is? Obviously, because Pearsall's going to see the field, unlike Penix.
Yes. Well, I like it a lot more than the Penix pick for a lot of obvious reasons. I think the biggest one is where the pick is. I think the
Draft
fact that
spot,
it's
yeah.
yeah, I think the fact it'd be a lot different of a story if if they took a wide receiver at 8. I think we'd be talking about that a lot more. But
Although
the
if they
fact
got like Odunze, that would be
yeah,
at
exactly, right?
that point.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But it's also the type of thing where you're also just looking at it's two you're preparing for two receivers potentially leaving this year compared to Kirk Cousins leaving 4 years down the road or 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
Right? That's mainly it for me. Like there's a difference between being over prepared and being slightly prepared. Because you're in this case, the 49ers are using a pick to get a guy who at the end of the first round, for when like what okay. As a comparison, what do you think would have been a smarter pick for the 49ers if they hadn't gone receiver? Like, what could they have improved on, do you think?
I probably would have gone with a guy like maybe a because they're I think their offensive line is the big thing.
Okay.
Where you've got Trent Williams, but especially like on that interior, Jake Brendel is their current starting center that's listed. Um, I've never heard of this guy before. Um, um, I don't know. Maybe he's better than I thought. I'm not big into the Niners offensive linemen, but even going with a guy like Jackson Powers Johnson, who went a little bit later in like the early 40s, was the guy that people were really excited about as an interior offensive lineman prospect. That would have been a pick that I think maybe they could have gone with. One of the other tackles, I don't necessarily remember who was left at that point, just to start opposite Trent Williams to potentially take over for him when he inevitably retires at some point because he is 35. Those are kind of the positions where I think you look at it and you're a Niners fan and you say, maybe that's where you can go elsewhere.
But do you think they're completely missing out by taking a guy in a position where, let's say, they do keep Samuels and they do keep Ayuk, and all of a sudden wide receiver is back to being arguably one of your most stacked areas? Like, do you think they're missing out is more the question I'm asking. Like, do you think that would it be a mistake? If they keep both Debo and Ayuk, do you think people are going to look at this pick poorly? Is kind of the question I'm fielding to you.
I mean, it obviously depends on how Pearsall plays, but I do think your point in terms of draft position is the key to that question. Like, I am more on the side of it being a smart pick. Just because I don't think they're missing out on as much because of draft position. Missing out on potentially a guy like Dallas Turner or Laiatu Latu, like literally the top defensive player in the draft they would have been getting because there wasn't a defensive player taken at that point when Atlanta picked at 8. You would have gotten your choice of defensive player at that point. Yeah. But so you're not missing out necessarily on as much. But there are still good prospects in the second round. So potentially you miss out on something. But it's not necessarily as big of a deal. However, I do think, despite all of that, despite me thinking it is a smart move, I do think it still excites me as a Seahawks fan who wants to see the Niners fail because it's a sign that their window is
closing.
closing a little bit. Now, if, like I said, if they nail this Pearsall pick and he comes in and seamlessly replaces whichever one of these guys will eventually leave for cap room, then they extend their window, actually. Then they've actually done a great job. But it is another risk to take. That's what the draft is all about, right? It's taking calculated risk.
If you were a betting man, of the two, who do you think is more likely to leave?
Ayuk.
Really?
I say Ayuk just because he is younger, so that's obviously a reason the Niners would want to keep him around. But Ayuk has been the guy where there's been chatter about him leaving, where he's been posting cryptic Instagram stories, basically saying like, "Yeah, I'm out of here," like all receivers do these days. But there's just been a lot more chatter about like Ayuk being potentially unhappy. He's also the guy who has an upcoming contract extension because it's something I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure that Debo already has a contract while Ayuk would be playing on his rookie contract. Yeah, Debo signed a 3-year, $71 million extension with the Niners, so he's good to go. Whereas Ayuk was not drafted that long ago.
No, he wasn't.
I believe he's still on his rookie contract.
Yep.
Yeah, he's still on his rookie contract. So he needs an extension. Contract disputes are always the reason people want to go. And then with cap issues there, it would be Ayuk if anybody leaves. I found it very interesting that they were actually even considering trading Debo, which I think speaks to how highly they value Ayuk.
Well, and I was about to say, Ayuk is... I mean, I do want to get his exact age, because I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I know he is very young, because he wasn't drafted very long ago. Like 26? 26, yeah. So 2 years younger than Debo. That's a lot less than I thought. I thought Ayuk would have been like 25 in my head. So I guess that frames it a little bit differently. But, I mean, I guess you make a good point on the fact that Debo is locked down. I think that's something that you definitely have to look at. I think you get more for Ayuk. I think, at least in my opinion, I think you definitely do, just because of it's an age thing. You're getting him cheaper, and all of those things are a lot easier to deal with. I think you could trade him to just the fact that he is on his rookie deal means you could almost trade him anywhere. Obviously, if you're the 49ers, it's not like your goal is to make the Chiefs any better than they currently are. But like you could pretty much trade him to any team that immediately wants an elite receiver to immediately take a run at it, right? And there's a lot of teams that would say yes to a trade for Ayuk, right? For a first or a second or what have you, right? There's a lot of teams out there that I think who would be willing to do that to instantly increase their Super Bowl odds. So at least to me, I look at it like that. I think in that sense, I think it makes sense. I think if you're looking at the two solely based on who you're getting more for, I think it's Ayuk. If I were looking at it and Mr. Ayuk wasn't already clearly unhappy, apparently, then maybe I'd be trading Debo, but I guess it's what
hard
it is.
to know. And
yeah.
And I mean, it does sound like they're both staying because I think Ayuk has just kind of been all over the place in terms of.
I just don't know. Why would you want to leave? Like the 49ers
I don't know.
Like
I'm sure it's a money thing. I'm sure it's a money thing.
Oh, sure. But they're the one team that it's really felt like for the last 4 years. Yeah, 4 years. They have been the one team that has really felt like they've been due for a Super Bowl. And
thank God every day it hasn't come.
Yeah, exactly, right? But you gotta admit, like, if with all the knowledge we have now of all the things that have gone their way, does it not feel weird that they don't have one?
It does, and it feels great.
Yeah, well, yeah,
they've been excruciatingly close.
Yes,
because they've made it to a couple and they've lost a couple because they've been in the NFC, and if they haven't made it, they've been in the NFC Championship game and had stuff like Brock Purdy injury.
I guess I just don't understand why you want to leave a team that has very clearly done very well, but yeah, whatever. Like
that's probably why, and maybe there's some stuff in the building we don't know, but who knows? I do think it was kind of just like a diva type move. It was immediately right after they lost the Super Bowl, I believe, so I'm sure that he wasn't happy with that. But I think he's come back around. Apparently, he texted John Lynch or whatever after they picked Pearsall and said like "fire pick, not gonna lie." So it sounds like he's back on board.
Oh, that's funny.
But who knows at this point? Yeah. Who knows at this point? And all that we know is like there is some sort of commotion around it.
Imagine if Kirk Cousins texted that to Atlanta, like fire pick, not even gonna lie.
Picking up his phone, fire pick, not gonna lie.
Yeah. Just Kirk texted the Atlanta GM. Yeah, I talked with the guy that Penix used to back up in his first year in college, and apparently he's got a real warm ass. So I like this pick. This one. I think this will work out well. Yeah. So
hopefully Ricky Pearsall is a warm ass.
Yeah, that's the lesson here. That's the lesson here. That's what you want out of your 8th overall pick. That is a very valuable thing out of a NFL caliber player.
Make that a stat at the combine. Ass temperature.
How warm can you get a bench in -20 in Buffalo after 20 minutes? That's the stat I want to see at the combine.
Oh yeah.
That's what I want to know. Once we figure that out, I think we're good. I don't actually know if I need any other stats. That's what allows you to stay in the league for 20 years. That's like McCown and Fitzpatrick. That's what they all had.
Yeah.
That is the true stat.
Warm ass.
Warm ass.